This could be huge for the Toronto Maple Leafs as a recent report has indicated a new Toronto Maple Leafs target. And it's no secret that the Leafs are looking to upgrade their wings. And this target and this player might surprise a lot of you. So I don't want to stay tuned for that on this episode, especially with Nick Robertson seeming like he is on the way out. This specific report, Darius, could be very interesting for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll dive right into it right now. And a lot of buzz is happening around Filip Zadina, and that is the player we're going to be discussing about today because per Zadina's agent, the report of him signing a PTO with the Sabres is total fabrication, but the San Jose Sharks winger reportedly has 3 teams interested, and we haven't gotten a full update yet on whether the Leafs are involved or not, but it seems like this would be a perfect fit for the Leafs, and there's some rumors going around the Leafs are targeting this guy. Now, Darius, Zadina is a very interesting player. He's not the fanciest. We've been discussing a lot of different players, but this one would be a PTO in all likelihood with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm just curious, before we get into some more of the reports, how you think Zadina could fit into this team.
Yeah, so I thought this player was really good when he first came into the league, right? And I thought he was going to be something special. Obviously, a top 10 pick by Detroit just a couple of years ago. I think he was 6th overall, something like that. And really, high ceiling for talent for sure. And over the last couple of years, it just hasn't worked out, especially in Detroit. And then he went to San Jose. And if you look at his stats, like nothing special at all, especially last year. But again, he may be a victim of playing for a bad team, like we've discussed in numerous videos over the last week or so with different multiple candidates for PTOs and stuff like that. So I think on a better team, he can, play better, probably put up more points. I think he's very skillful. And obviously on the Leafs, he could look very good. But I am a little bit worried about the Leafs adding guys who are all skill still. I think that they need to add more guys who can produce for them in the playoffs. A guy like, Matthew Nyes, who can score for you in the regular season, and he's a playoff performer, guys like that. So I'm a little, skeptical about a guy like Zadina. And obviously he spent a lot of time on the right side. He plays on the right side, right wing. So it's a little puzzling for the Leafs, but he's a left shot. I'm sure he can get used to the left side. It's actually easier to play on the left side if you're left-handed. So I'm sure that wouldn't be an issue, but I'm sure the Leafs are doing their due diligence and looking at everybody who's available right now. And again, a PTO is very low risk. If it doesn't work out, he doesn't have to stay with the team and they can cut him, right? So it could be an option that they're looking at. I'm sure they want to bring as many guys as they can to training camp and have everyone fight for a couple of those spots because they have a lot of left wings, but who's actually going to take those spots? We don't know at this point, and we don't know who they're going to sign still because it sounds like it could be 3 guys.
Yeah, and it seems like, again, at this point, even though he is technically a right winger, you mentioned it, the Leafs would probably, if they sign this guy, play him at left wing. We know that Elliot Friedman, that's not John Tavares, Elliot Friedman came out and said that we know that things are percolating surrounding Toronto Maple Leafs pursuing left wing options, and Zadina could be considered a left wing option in this case on a PTO. And again, a lot of this depends on what happens with Nick Robertson. Zadina, he's not going to factor into a huge equation for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but if they do sign him, he did still play 72 games last year on a very bad team, but we also have to be wary. Not every player who plays on a bad team is going to end up like Benoit and turn into someone who's very useful for the team. True. And we can see there's just been a bunch of reports about the Leafs going for wingers. Leafs are weighing their internal options, their external candidates at left wing. We have some, of course, prospects in the pipeline who could probably figure into their lineup. And there's just so many players here. It seems like they're going to make a signing. That's why when Brad Living came out a few days ago, or a week ago now probably, and said that they're not done making moves, the Leafs have been linked to a ton of players since then. And I don't think Zadina's super exciting just on his own, but I think if you add him with a couple of other guys that have a bit higher ceilings and have more defined roles, I mean, again, the biggest question mark now is Nick Robertson, and we're making these, we're all talking about these different targets under the assumption that Nick Robertson is going without knowing what we're going to get back, because what the Leafs get back for Nick Robertson really will kind of shape and alter my opinion about whether they get this guy as a depth 3rd or 4th liner.
Yeah, and I think Zadina is only exciting for the Leafs if Nick Robertson goes out via trade and then he surprises in training camp. Otherwise, I don't see him as an exciting player because, again, not everyone's going to end up like Benoit, like you said. Like, we have a couple of those stories, yes, but not everyone is going to end up like Benoit coming from a really bad team. It turns out you're a good player because you're putting a better system and a better team, right? So Zadina may not work out like that. Again, last season wasn't great for him. Obviously, he played in almost every game, so that was good to see. But I just don't know if it's too exciting. The Leafs are linked to a lot of left wings too. We talked about Max Pacioretty, who is like 50-50, at least in Leaf fans' minds, right? A lot of people do want him. A lot of people would pass on him. There's Nick Cousins as well, which I don't know if I'm a big fan of that too. If it comes at a low cost, maybe, because, he plays with that edge and something that the Leafs need more of. But again, he didn't play for the Panthers down the stretch when they won the cup anyway. So a lot of options there. Grebyankin too, which we talked about. Can he take a spot? I would like to see what he does in training camp, because we haven't seen him in the North American game yet, obviously, right? So we can't make any decisions based off of, the KHL yet. So there's a lot up in the air for the Leafs still. And, if it's a PTO, again, low risk. So I wonder if they do take a look at a guy like Zadina, but he's not entirely exciting to me personally, just because of his style of play. But I do think he can be useful in maybe scoring, and I think he would look better on the Leafs. But like I've mentioned, I would like them to move more towards, less floaters, who, a lot of guys just moving around the lineup, and more defined roles throughout the lineup. And what each line is going to bring come playoff time, not even playoff time, throughout the season. I don't know if Zadina would help that case.
Yeah, we're talking about, like we mentioned, we talked about Max Pacioretty. We talked about even Nikita Grebyankin. You mentioned it. I mean, there's also Easton Cowan, who could factor into the equation this season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you look at the left wings by average ice time last year. Bertuzzi led them. He is gone. Matthew Nyes, Bobby McMahon, Noah Gregor, gone. Nick Robertson, going to be most likely gone. So then you're left with just two of Nyes and Bobby McMahon, which at that point, obviously, you're going to factor in, they're going to make a signing, or they're going to use a guy like Nikita Grebyankin. But that would be asking a lot of Grebyankin, or even asking a lot of Max Pacioretty, who's 35 years old. That being said, if you're picking between a guy like Max Pacioretty or Zadina, you'd pick Max Pacioretty most of the time, especially because Zadina hasn't really had a great season at the NHL level. He hasn't played on phenomenal teams. Last year, 23 points. You can see it, 13 goals, 10 assists. He put up 10 goals, 24 points back in 2021, but he would be a third or fourth liner and a guy who maybe factors into the equation every night, but it's not super exciting. That being said, they need to fill out this roster one way or another, especially if Nick Robertson's going. And that's what makes what we covered in yesterday's video, the Chris Johnson report about Nick Robertson not wanting to stay in Toronto, that much harder to swallow when we're looking at some of the alternatives now and saying, wow, Nick Robertson would have most likely, and he probably is, like you always mentioned, Darius, going to take a leap to whatever team he's traded to. But the alternatives out there, the alternatives aren't great unless you're getting someone back for Nick Robertson that can help make these not mediocre players, but these lower end players, the pill easier to swallow in that regard.
Yeah, and in terms of Nick Robertson too, like I think if he were to come into training camp, if he were to sign the contract, again, looking very, less and less likely by the day, and it looks like he's going to get traded. But if he were to come into training camp, I still think he could take anybody's job that's up there, right? A lot of people might think that's ridiculous, but in terms of his offensive game, if he was able to put it together and work with Berube and the coaching staff and kind of put his other parts of the game together, his defensive zone, because he makes some puzzling decisions. Honestly, watching him, it is crazy, right? He does make some weird decisions especially in the neutral zone too. But if he was able to put that all together and start working on that, obviously his offensive upside, I think he could take anybody's job on the left wing side. So that goes for really anybody, right? In the lineup, like if somebody, outplays Matthew Nyes in training camp, even Easton Cowan, for example, I don't know how likely that is, but I think the Leafs have a lot of options at left wing. But again, it's just a lot of up in the air. They need more defined roles. They need, where guys are going to play. They need to find that out, right? And that might be through signings or PTOs, like you're mentioning with Zadina as well. Maybe even Pacioretty, but I think they should go younger anyway and more tenacious. That's just my thoughts. And maybe via trade as well. There's some other options out there via trade that we'll cover in different videos that I think could be exciting. But this is certainly an option. I just don't know if it would be my first option. But it sounds like, they're going to have to do something quick here, because Nick Robertson's probably on his way out, and they're going to have to figure out probably what the third and the fourth line left wing spot looks like, because, I would think that Matthew Nyes and Bobby McMahon would play in the top two lines, but you never know.
Yeah, and the silver lining here, he's only 24 years old, so he does have some room to develop if they sign him. He was the 6th overall pick 6 years ago, so very, very interesting. Let us know what your thoughts are on this player. I know all of us are waiting for the Nick Robertson something to happen regarding that on that front and regarding that. But in that regard, we wait and hope that the Leafs get something back for Nick Robertson. And let us know what your thoughts are. Do you want to see Filip Zadina as a Leaf? See you soon.